Well, if you've been here in the past, then you may have heard me teach on the stories of the Old Testament. I've done 2 of those about generally how to read the stories of the Old Testament. And this is a 3rd one, which is a continuation of that series. It's going to be slightly different in that what I've decided to do is I'm going to tell the story of Joseph and highlight some different things in the story than we normally would see. Because I believe if you just read the story of Joseph on your own, you're capable of understanding what the Lord has for you to get out of that story. I think that it is fairly clear, the story of Joseph. So you think of it as you go into the food pantry, and here's the story of Joseph, that's the food. All of the meat, your cheese, your milk, your bread, all of that is on the bottom shelf where even a child can reach it. But there are things on the higher shelves where you have like your cumin and your other little things that may not be necessary, but may add that add something to the mix. So we're going to be looking at the story of Joseph in this way. The background, the Lord has chosen Abraham to be the person from whom he's going to raise up a family and then a nation, and out of that nation and Abraham's line, the Lord Jesus will come and be the Messiah and save the world. Well, a few generations have gone by, and a man named Jacob, he's now the grandson of Abraham, had 12 sons, and by 4 different wives. It made for a complicated situation, which could be a whole nother series of sermons on their relationships. And those complex family dynamics have come down to the point where he had one wife that was his favorite wife, and that wife had 2 children, 2 boys, a boy named Joseph, and then later a boy named Benjamin, and she died while giving birth to Benjamin. Well, Joseph is his dad's favorite. Unfortunately, Jacob showed outrageous favoritism in his relationships, just like his dad. His dad had preferred Jacob's brother, and his mom preferred Jacob, and they had really kind of unhealthy, we would say, family relationships, parts of their marriage that needed to get to know the Lord. Parts of their family life that need to get to know the Lord. He outrageously preferred Joseph. Joseph is the favorite son. And I will go through it fairly quickly. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the details of the story. But Jacob, the dad, gives Joseph a coat, which we think means a coat of many colors. But since the word only appears twice in the Old Testament, or in Hebrew, it's just his best guess, you know. It's a fancy coat that he hadn't given the same thing to the brothers. And then he sort of puts Joseph in charge of the brothers. Joseph comes and brings a bad report about his brothers to the dad, and that makes the brothers mad. And things go on in this way. Joseph then has 2 dreams, and he comes and tells his brothers, I dreamed that they're each of us, like there are these bundles of grain, and your bundles bow down to my bundles. And then I saw the 12 stars and the sun and the moon bowing like down to me. And actually his dad got mad at him about that. And he's like, what? Are your mother and father going to bow down to you? Like, come on. And so it kind of made even the dad mad. Well, time goes on, and Joseph is now a teenager, and his father sends him to find his brothers. His brothers, they're herders, so his brothers have the sheep, and they are, we would say, semi-nomadic in that sense. So they would tend to move them. They don't just keep wandering forever, but they tend to cycle through the same area, moving from one grazing area to another grazing area. Well, he has to go find his brothers. He goes to find his brothers, and the first thing I'm going to point out is his brothers say in 37, Jacob says, aren't your brothers are pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I'll send you to them. And Joseph said, okay. So he said, go see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock. Bring me word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. So clearly he gets to Shechem, no brothers. So I picture him being like in the parking lot when you can't find your car. He's just wandering around the parking lot or the garage. Then you realize you're actually on the level below, you know. And so this guy says, oh, what do you do? What are you seeking? I'm seeking my brothers, he said. Please, tell me, please, where they're pasturing the flock. And the man said, they have gone away. For I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now, the thing, this is the kind of incident that we read right over, and we may even wonder, why is that in there? And I'm sure there are numerous reasons, but there's two that can stand out. It's the two reasons why it's in there. One is that it is a common technique in storytelling, and especially you see it in the Bible if you notice, to build tension by having another incident in between where you are in the story and the point that the listeners want to get to in the story. But we want him to find his brothers, right? We don't want him to be interacting with some dude that doesn't matter, whose name we don't even know, in Shechem. You know, we don't want to hear about him getting directions in a parking lot. You know, like, well, I would not include that in my story if I have any discipline about my own life. I wouldn't say, oh, then I came here, and you know, we hate it when a person wanders off. Well, that's deliberate. It's building tension. You're like, come on, what's going to happen? The other thing is, here's a spoiler. The overall point of the story of Joseph is that the Lord works through human sin and evil to produce good. And that the Lord is faithful to take care of his people. And he even uses other people's bad intentions and makes good out of that. Well, the thing is, this Dothan thing, now, he could have gone to Shechem and said, my brothers aren't here, and gone back to his dad. But he didn't. He met some guy. What are the chances that he bumps into a guy who heard the brothers say where they're going? What are the chances of that? It reminds me of years ago, maybe 30 years ago, there were these three missionaries with New Tribes Mission in Colombia. It's now Ethnos 360 Mission. They were flying. One of them was a pilot, and this pilot was flying this missionary couple back to their tribal village. Well, as they're approaching it, there was a huge storm over the village, and the pilot said, we can't land on your airstrip. We're going to have to divert. In fact, we have to find somewhere to land. This is unexpected, and they found another place big enough to land. I think it was even a field that was flat enough. And they pull up there. There's some buildings, and these rebel guerrillas come out of the buildings and take them hostage and hold them for ransom for like a year in the jungle. And they said they all got out fine, but they said that year or so in the jungle, the thing that was such an encouragement to them was that there was a storm over that first landing strip, because that means the Lord knew where they were going to go, and this is all part of his plan. If he didn't want them to be captured, there didn't have to be a storm there. And so if the Lord didn't want Joseph to have all these bad things happen to him, I shouldn't say didn't want him to. If it was not within his plan, if he wasn't holding on to Joseph, he didn't need to meet this guy in Dothan, who tells him to go to Dothan, right? Okay, well, the story goes on. So that's just a little thing, and you can go we can go right past it. But it's there, and it supports the whole. Right? Well, he goes on, and the brothers see him. They're like, oh, my gosh, here's the dreamer. Let's kill him. That's where their mind goes. That's where they're like, let's kill him. No, let's prank him. Let's kill him. So They're going to kill him. And one of them, the oldest brother, Reuben, says, no, let's not kill him. Then his blood will be on our hands. Let's throw him into a pit. Sort of with the idea that he'll starve to death and had nothing to do with me. Now, he secretly was hoping to rescue him because he was really out with Dad. And he wanted to get back in with Dad. So he thought, if I rescue Joseph, I'll be okay with Dad again, right? Now, he doesn't care about Joseph. I mean, Joseph can actually die as far as if he was fine with Dad, he would let Joseph die, right? So he goes and they sit down to eat their dinner. Joseph is crying in the pit, and they've taken his robe, they've torn that robe up, and they say, they kill a goat, and they take the blood of the goat and put it on the robe. And they say, we'll go to Dad and say, do you recognize this thing? We won't say Joseph's dead. They're like, we found this. I don't know, Dad. We found this robe. And then his dad will say, oh, no, Joseph's dead. So that was their plan. Well, and then the dad will conclude, wild animals eating him. Well, then it says they sat down to eat. It's interesting. They're going to make a plan that that make them think wild animals have eaten Joseph. And they sit down and eat, which we don't have to know that they sat down and eat. It's a way to tell us, well, they are the wild animals that have devoured Joseph, right? So then Reuben is gone. And while Reuben's gone, Judah, who is the fourth oldest son, the top three are totally out with Dad, by the way. Judah is now at the point where he's supposed to inherit stuff. And Judah says, why should he let him die here? Let's make some money off him. There's a caravan. Let's sell him to the caravan as a slave. And then we won't have killed him, and there will be no blood on our hands. And so they're like, great idea. So they sell him. Then Reuben comes back. He's like, oh my gosh, what happened? But he can't do anything. So they sell Joseph and wash their hands of him. They go back to Jacob. They do the plan. Jacob weeps and cries, and they try to console him. They're there, Dad. They're there. It actually says that later on, that they're like don't remember, like we tried to console him. Like really, like can you imagine, you're sitting there, they're straight-faced while he's crying, and you're just So Joseph goes off to Egypt. He's bought by a Egyptian officer named Potiphar, and he is very skilled, and the Lord's with him, and he runs Potiphar's house. Potiphar is in charge of everything Potiphar's got. And now, so he's doing pretty well for himself. So then, it says, he was handsome in form and appearance, which is interesting. It's the very same phrase that's used to describe his mother earlier on, when his mother Rachel is introduced in the story. It says she was beautiful in form and appearance. It's exactly the same thing. So, and in this time, it's this is to explain why what's happened next is going to happen, and that is Potiphar's wife wants to sleep with him. So she starts making proposals, and here's what she says. After a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. I think it's interesting how much is packed into that sentence. And because of our experience in life, we can read a whole lot into that. I mean, like we can all imagine the whole story of how it started and her beginning to notice the pool boy, and and all that kind of thing. We can write the whole story in there if we want to. But then it just says, lie with me, okay? We would say it probably in a cruder way nowadays. And I mean, that's a very short, extremely abrupt, just a proposition. But then here's what Joseph says. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So you could read this and we move past it, and I did that dozens of times. And then But you realize there's also a contrast between her side of the conversation and his side of the conversation. And that's deliberate on the part of the storyteller. Her desires are very base and evil, and they're just animalistic. And that is reflected in how she communicated. She's almost barking, And then his answer is long, it is eloquent, and it is rooted in theology and in ethics and what's right and wrong. And it shows the kind of person he is, comes through the way he says no. It could have just said, but Joseph refused her. But no, it wants us to be clear, he didn't refuse her because he didn't find her attractive or any other reason. It was these reasons, and we get to see the kind of man he was, actually a young man at this point that he was. So he runs off and leaves his coat. She holds his coat and he leaves it. She uses this as evidence. She calls in the servants and said, look, and it's interesting, she says, this Hebrew has come among us. Now she wanted him a few minutes before. Now, suddenly, he's a Hebrew. Because this is what people are like. When you have conflict, when you're angry, so often people look for that thing that makes us different, or that thing, that aspect of the person that will make them categorized as an outsider from the group. And that is just an evil human tendency that blights families, nations, society. And people, especially some people, hopefully some of us don't, have a tendency when they get angry to go for the throat. Just whatever is a vulnerable point, and they don't even think, they're just going to go for the throat. And so she does this. Well, he goes to prison, and it said, even in prison the Lord is with him. And before you know it, he's running everything in the prison. And the guy in the prison doesn't concern himself with anything, because Joseph's running everything. Well, two of Pharaoh's servants come in. One is his cupbearer, and one is his baker. And they come in, and the Pharaoh is angry with them. This actually, given the fact that it's his cupbearer and his baker, there was probably an attempt to poison the Pharaoh. That's just because they both have to do with food handed to him. So there's an ongoing federal investigation into the things that happened, and they are held in custody. And they each have a weird dream. And as you do, you say, I had a really weird dream last night. And people think, oh gosh, I do not want to hear a weird dream. But yes, we will politely listen to your weird dream. And we know that you're going to keep backing up and saying, I was home, but I wasn't really home, and it wasn't really my car. And you know how it goes. So anyway, they each tell their dream. And Joseph says, well, the interpretation of dreams is from the Lord. Tell me. He interprets each dream. He says to the cupbearer that you are going to be restored in 3 days. He says to the baker, you're going to be executed in 3 days. And he says, please, to the cupbearer, he apparently ignores the baker. He says, when you come back to the Pharaoh, I'm here unjustly. There's nothing wrong with him saying that, by the way, making a good faith attempt to get out of the prison. Occasionally people have said, he did not have faith in God. It's like, well, maybe the Lord was using this opportunity to get him out. So, it is normal. So he did say, remember me. But the guy, and it happened just as Joseph said it would, and the cupbearer forgot Joseph. Well, he forgot Joseph until the right time. When you look at the life of Joseph, is it a good thing or a bad thing that the cupbearer forgot him? It's a good thing that the cupbearer forgot him. If he'd remembered it earlier and even gotten him sprung, what would he be? He would just be some dude living in Egypt, And so later on, the Pharaoh has a dream about healthy cows and ugly cows. The ugly cows eat the healthy cows, and then another dream with grains, ears of wheat, the terrible withered ears of wheat eating up the good ones. The magicians don't understand the dream. That's when the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And they go and get him from the pit. It's interesting, you also, in this, when, in general, the place that Joseph is located in this is called the jail or the prison. The Hebrew word is a word for a jail. But when Joseph talks about it, he calls it the pit, which is the exact same word that they had used for the place that his brothers had thrown him. And the narrator one time also refers it to the pit when he gets out. They took him out of the pit, which it wasn't really a pit. It wasn't a pit, it was a building. But this is highlighting a connection between what the brothers did to him and what Potiphar did to him, which we'll come back to that later. Because it's very important, in fact. So Joseph interprets the dreams, and the Pharaoh recognizes that the spirit of the gods are with him, or with God, or with the gods. I mean, he's probably interpreting it through his own polytheistic worldview. And he makes Joseph the head of everything in Egypt. So again, now Joseph is again running everything. And the Pharaoh isn't concerned about anything. He's only keeping back, he's only concerned about his dinner. And Joseph's running the whole show. And you might say, look at that. Yay, Joseph. End of the story of Joseph. God is faithful to Joseph. But that's not the point. Joseph wasn't in that position because God loves him and wants him to have a nice position. Well, the famine goes all the way up to where his family is. And his brothers go down to Egypt to buy grain, because they have grain in Egypt because Joseph did a good job of preparing for the famine. Well, Joseph sees the brothers. They think he's an Egyptian. They don't know that he speaks their language. And so he questions them and finds out he really wants to know, is Benjamin around? You think, why would he want to? I would used to think, well, of course he wants to know about his brother, but because that's the only one who didn't show up. But you think what they did to Joseph, the question is going to be in his mind, have they done that to Benjamin as well? Has Benjamin been sold in slavery to Babylon or something, or is he dead in a pit? And apparently he finds out Benjamin's alive. So he sends them back and says, don't come back unless you bring Benjamin. And he also tells them to return the silver, which is interesting. I didn't get why, when they opened up their bags and found the silver there, why the brothers, they were very upset when they found their money that they had paid for the grain had been returned to them. They were very upset about that. And it's actually within the sort of magical mindset that would have dominated in the ancient Near East. They are acutely aware of the fact they sold Joseph into Egypt. They've been saying that to each other. And they took silver and they sent Joseph to Egypt. Now they've gone to Egypt, and Egypt will not accept their silver. They're trying to return the silver to Egypt. When they see this back, I don't know if they were thinking this initially, but when they see that silver returned, that is what would go through their mind. People who are experts on that type of thinking say that is where their brain would go. We got silver for him. Like, his blood is not, we are not forgiven, and it is on our heads, and it is following us. Like, supernaturally, the silver has come in here. This is like miraculous, supernatural curse. It would be in some movie, It's the silver. So they go back. They say, well, we need to bring Benjamin with us. Jacob says, no way. Well, think of the psychology why he won't send Benjamin. Like when he sent Joseph out, he never came back, right? So now he has reacted by holding on to this thing. He's actually reacted to the loss of Joseph by having less faith in God. And this happens to us. This has happened to me in my lifetime. There have been times when I trust God greatly. I am not entirely pleased with what comes from it. And I say, I'm not going to be doing this. We're not going to be associated quite so closely in the near future, Lord, because I really don't like the outcome. And that's what happened to Jacob. I can take care of my stuff better than the Lord can. So Benjamin is not going out of my sight. Well, the funny thing is, you think about this, what is the Lord trying to do with the famine and with the request to bring Benjamin? He is actually bringing Joseph back. He's not only not intending to take Benjamin away, he is restoring Joseph. But Jacob won't have it because he is stuck on holding on to his own things. He's going to hold on to Benjamin. Well, Reuben comes along and says, well, we got to go. Okay, here are my two sons. Kill them if Benjamin doesn't come back. Like, okay, that's a rather clumsy attempt. I mean, do you think Jacob really wants to compensate himself for the loss of his son by killing two of his grandsons? I mean, why would you do that? But this is the second clumsy attempt of Reuben to try to ingratiate himself with his dad. Fails both times. And the second time, the first time Judah beat him in that Judah got Joseph sent to Egypt. And this time also, it's Judah who succeeds. After enough time, he makes a long plea to Jacob about how, please, we have to go to Egypt that we may live and not die. Which actually, that's a theme throughout the whole of the book of Genesis and all the first 5 books of the Bible, which I talked about once. Live and not die, that we will live and not die. Being near the Lord, that's life. Being away from the Lord, that's death. So Judah says, we've got to do this thing. And Jacob, and he says, I will be surety for the boy. So I will take care of Benjamin. I promise you, I'll take care of Benjamin. And so the Lord is turning up the heat on Jacob. I mean, he just turns up the heat. It says the famine was very severe in the land. So, and this is the kind of thing in our own lives. We can be saying, well, I'm praying about this, Lord, and the situation is getting worse. Why? Where are you? Well, very often, the Lord is turning up the heat in some way for some reason. We don't know why. I can't tell you why in your own situation, but the Lord is in charge of these things. Not that he delights in bad things happening to us, but that he will use these things. He will orchestrate it so that good things come out of bad things. He recycles things. He takes our trash and makes wonderful things out of it. It doesn't mean it wasn't trash. It doesn't mean the Lord wasn't brokenhearted about that loss or that terrible thing that happened to you. But he can take that thing that even broke his heart and he can make something beautiful out of it. So that is the point you see in the story of Joseph. But here it's played out in the smaller scale in Jacob's life. Jacob finally relents and goes. He sends Benjamin. Here the story is long. But they go back and Joseph sees them, and he does this long ruse with them where he restores their silver again. And he has this silver cup that he tells his servant to put into Benjamin's bag. And then when they're on their way back, his soldiers come up and say, hey, somebody stole his cup. And the brothers are indignant. Of course we didn't steal his cup because it's stupid, of course he didn't. And they say, whoever it is should be killed, whatever. And they say, no, it'll just be whoever did it. Or they say, all of us, if any of us did it, we'll all just, kill us all. Because it's absurd. And they take them back, and then they open the bags, which is an interesting bit of drama, and they go from the oldest down to Benjamin, the youngest, and then it's in Benjamin's bag. Imagine the reveal. Oh my gosh, like if there's one person who it can't, it's a Benjamin. I mean, it's not Simeon, it's Benjamin. And actually, Simeon, I didn't mention, Joseph held on to Simeon. He didn't, one of his brothers. He put him in prison until Jacob was willing to let Simeon rot in jail in Egypt forever, rather than sending Benjamin down. So, and I've always wondered, why did he pick Simeon? Was Simeon the most vocal about wanting to kill him maybe at the pit? I don't know, because I don't know. But so now they're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And he's like, no, you guys can go. I'll just keep Benjamin as a slave. You think, well, I didn't really understand all that Joseph was doing here for a long time. But you think about what Joseph is doing is he is giving his brothers the opportunity to do to Benjamin what they did to him. And they're giving him the ultimate buy. I mean, they can just do that. There is nobody on planet Earth that could say it was them that did it. I mean, they can just say, whew, we're done with Benjamin. I mean, whew. And what Judah does, and it says, can I talk to you in private? He speaks to Jacob in private, to Joseph in private, and he pours out his heart. And he does one of the longest speeches in the book of Genesis, very long speech. And he says that take me instead of Benjamin, basically, because this will break his father's heart. Take me instead. And this shows to Joseph that his brothers have actually changed. And so he reveals who he is. And he invites his family to come to Egypt. Like that, that action is what brought the final uniting to the family, brought the family back. So everybody comes from Egypt. They're saved from the famine. Joseph is blessed by Jacob. And then when Jacob dies, the brothers are all nervous again. And they say, oh no, Dad, I think, did I do a slide for this or not? I can't remember. Dad, if I did, it is time for the slide. But if not, then I'll just tell you. Dad, it's about, Dad said before he died that you should forgive him.
What scripture was it?
Genesis, I don't know, 50. 50. Okay, sorry. I said that I had, anyway. This was actually my fault. And Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead. They said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. Like if you've seen The Godfather 2, a few of you have, you do know that after Mom's funeral, the one brother, that's that he waited till Mom's funeral to off his brother. So it's not that I even recommend the movie, but it's famous, okay? They sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. Now, did he say this? We have no idea. We don't know. You can decide. Each time you read it, you might think differently. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. They're really playing that card. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants, just like the dream said. Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Now, so do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now, one thing is this shows something about his character and how Joseph has managed to process what's happened to him with the Lord. Because I tell you, even understanding this in your mind, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to live it out in your relationships. That's for sure. To actually live it out to the point of, yes, I'm going to take care of you. Even though you did this stuff to me, I know the Lord is behind it, and I will totally forgive you. That's remarkable. And so that's the end. And in fact, as you read it, that verse is the main point. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. So here's the whole story is encapsulated in this verse that stands out like a stick of dynamite, which is another thing. As you read the stories of the Old Testament, you will encounter these verses that sometimes stand out like dynamite, that are just like, here's the point, here's a point, boom. And like, do not look on the outward appearance. Man looks on the outward appearance. The Lord looks at the heart. And you're like, oh, that you realize that is very important, and it pulls all the story around it into focus. So here, now, I've told you the story. I'm going to make I have two large comments about it. The first one is something that is hard to notice. But one thing is, that about the Joseph story is, it is filled with examples of twos. Joseph is robed in honor twice, by his dad and by Pharaoh, right? He is disrobed in dishonor unjustly twice, by his brothers and by Potiphar's wife. He is imprisoned unjustly twice, by his brothers in the pit and by Potiphar after the wife incident. He is vindicated and elevated twice. After each one, he is vindicated and elevated. He is put in charge as a slave twice. Once in Potiphar's house, once in the prison. He is put in charge as a free person twice. Once by his dad, once by Pharaoh. He has two dreams. Pharaoh has two dreams that are repeated 2 times in the story. There are 2 prisoners and 2 dreams that he interprets. The brothers visit 2 times. He has 2 sons. And finally, there's probably more, there are 2 resolutions to the story. There's a resolution when everybody comes down, and then there's a second resolution when Jacob dies. So it is a point, yes. Now, the point of the story, which is what I just read, that is, remember, what man meant for evil, God meant for good. That God takes the things that people intend for evil and do for evil and makes good out of it. Well, why are there so many doubles in the book of Joseph? And I actually read a commentator saying, apparently it's just a literary device. But he missed something, which is a rare thing I actually saw myself. Most things Bible teachers get from other teachers. At least I hope most other Bible teachers don't get as much from other teachers as I do. So I hope that they get as much as I do, and I'm not just mimicking everybody else. So here's the thing. Here's what Joseph said about the doubling of Pharaoh's dream. The doubling of Pharaoh's dream means the thing is fixed by God, and God will bring it about. So the story itself tells us what is the point of the doubling. The whole point of all those doubles is to underline again that this whole thing is fixed by God. And we can read this story and look at our own lives and say, Lord, am I held in your hands in a net as tight as you were holding Jacob and his family? You'd say, yes, he's the same God. He is the same God. The second thing, there's another point. Joseph was 2 times imprisoned unjustly in the pit, a pit in the prison. Both times, the alternative was his execution. Potiphar could have simply killed him, but he didn't. His brothers were going to kill him, but they didn't. So both times, those prisons were a place of confinement and also a place of safety. That prison was the alternative, was death. And that is exactly what Egypt is going to be for the nation of Israel. Israel is going into Egypt. They're going to end up as slaves for centuries. But while they are slaves, they will grow into a great people in a way that they could not have done back home, surrounded by cultures that are very similar to their culture. It would have been impossible for them not to assimilate and become like their culture. So they were among the Egyptians that are very different from them, that don't like them, and that allowed them to be separate enough to be a people that the Lord could then use to save the whole world. So Egypt was to Israel what the pit in the prison was to Joseph. So, and there's more. Big deal. And this will have to be fast. Here's the question. If you also notice, there is another character in this story that is massively important in the story. He is as important as Joseph in the story, and that's Judah. Because it's Judah is the one that saves Joseph from being killed. But then later, he's the guy who convinces Jacob to let Joseph, to send Benjamin down to Egypt. And he's the one that persuades Joseph that he is, that they're okay. That the brothers have changed. And you wonder, in the beginning, this Judah, who's like eating a meal and saying, let's sell the kid, doesn't seem like the guy who's making this impassioned speech about his dad. This is a guy who sat there and watched his dad cry and was just glad that Joseph's gone. Going down to a guy who is going to exchange his own life for his brother, a brother who is in the same position that Joseph had been. He's going to give his life for his brother. And as far as Judah knew, Benjamin was guilty. As far as Judah knew that. And that is also the first time in the Bible that somebody offers himself in place of another. So, Judah's pretty important. Now, in this story, I told the story the way the story of Joseph is usually told. There's another part of it, a whole chapter I skipped over. We don't even notice it. Pastors skip it all the time for reasons that will become clear. And that is the story of Judah. After they send they send Joseph to Egypt, it tells a short story where Judah had 3 sons, and he married the oldest one to a woman named Tamar. And it says, but the Lord is displeased with the oldest son, so he took his life. Well, he tells the second son, Onan, to go and raise up children with Tamar that would inherit in place of his brother. It says, but Onan didn't want that. And so he practiced birth control, let's say, with Tamar. And the Lord was displeased with that and struck him down. Now, he wasn't displeased with the birth control per se. The problem was that the Hebrew verb is a repeated action. Now, Onan could have said no. It's very clear. You can say, no, I don't want to do that. But he said he would do it. Now, he could also have his own wife. He's going to have his own other wife with his own children. But so basically, he accepted access to Tamar for his own enjoyment, but was short-circuiting the reason why she was available to him. So he was just using her, and the Lord struck him dead. So then Joseph, they think this is like a black widow, like two husbands in a row die. Well, I've got my younger son. Wait for him to get old enough, says Judah. Well, years pass, and the youngest son is old enough. He doesn't give her. So Tamar then disguises herself as a prostitute, puts herself in the way of Judah, which tells you the kind of guy Judah is. You're thinking, well, if I'm dressed like a hooker, then he'll sleep with me. It's like, what? I mean, this doesn't work for me. But so she got Judah to sleep with her, not knowing that it was Tamar. She's wearing a veil. But she said, give me your, he said, I'll give you a goat from my flock. And she said, well, give me a pledge. Give me your signet ring and your cord or your staff. And he gives them to her. Well, then the next day, he sends somebody with payment, and she's not there. So they're like, oh, let's just forget it. It's a little embarrassing anyway. Well, later, they come to him and they say, hey, Tamar is pregnant. And they say, kill her. Bring her out here and kill her, because she's been sleeping around. And Tamar says, do you recognize these? Thing is, that is the very same phrase that Judah and his brothers used when they brought to Jacob, that thing to Jacob. Do you recognize this? Same thing. And he was going to give a goat. They used the goat's blood to put on that, to deceive the brother. Not only that, going back, remember what Jacob did to his dad? He pretended to be his brother. He deceived his dad, and by using a goat. They killed a goat, and they put the skins on his hands and arms so he'll be hairy like his brother. So Jacob deceived his dad with a goat. He was himself deceived with a goat. And then Judah, his son, had this thing happen to him with deception involving a goat. And so Judah hears that. He sees those things, and he says, she is more righteous than I. And she has twins, another two, but she has twins, and Jesus' line comes through them, through one of those twins, from this thing that happened with Tamar. And in the New Testament, Tamar is named, which implies that basic approval of what she did. Like Bathsheba, who is also, she's had an affair with David. She is not named in Jesus' genealogy. She's called she who is the wife of Uriah, which implies that it was not okay to have an affair with David. But what Tamar did was, the Lord's like, well, she was doing what she needed to do to do her thing. So, but that also is the first repentance in the Bible. When he says she is more righteous than I, that's the first time in the Bible that somebody repents of what they had said or done verbally. So Judah is actually the key guy, and this explains the transformation of his character. So this thing happens, the characters are not static. That's a point I made before. They change. And the Lord did not, the suffering that Judah went through was not wasted. It transformed him, and it made him a man who could go to his father as a man who also, Judah tried to save his son, hold on to his last son, because he had lost the other ones. He tried to hold on, just like Jacob was trying to hold on to Benjamin. And that parallel of that similarity of that point of suffering is what connected him to Dad to be able to help Dad let go. And he was able to passionately give himself in place of Benjamin because he is a man who had lost a child himself and can't imagine his dad going through the same thing. And so we see that, basically, that Judah is also, the story of Judah buried in there is not just an aside thing, it's a key thing to understand the whole story, and the themes fit with the whole story of Joseph. So I am aware that I'm a few minutes into the break time, so I'm just going to stop. So thanks anyway. Thank you.